Hi, good evening. And this time I'd like to call the Teaching, Learning, Equity, and Pupil Services Committee to order. It is 7:51. And I'm just pulling up the agenda again because it just closed. Thanks. Just kidding. Okay, great. At this time, Ms. Schopp, may we please have a roll call for attendance?
Miller,
Present?
Schneider,
Present.
Winfield.
Present.
All members are present and in the boardroom.
Thank you very much. At this time, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. At this time, that takes us to item 1D, approval of the minutes from April 19th, 2022.
So moved.
I second that.
All right, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously, which takes us to 1E, the appointment of vice chair. Board Member Schneider, would you be interested in serving as vice chair?
Yes, I would. Thank you.
All right, so you are now officially appointed, which takes us, thank you very much for your willingness to do so. That takes us to item 2A, Restorative Practices, and at this time I'd like to invite Mr. Weir. Oh, okay, thanks.
Good evening. I'm Melissa Beavers. I'm the Executive Director of Pupil Services. I'm joined in the boardroom with Carrie Oscar, our Coordinator of Specialized Behavioral Support, and Eric Weir is joining us remotely. He's the Director of Special Education and Student Services. Tonight, we're going to provide you with some information that we've done to secure a company to reset and ground the district back in restorative practices. And my two colleagues are going to walk you through the work that was done and then the company that we are going to recommend, which is New Root. Restorative practices are identified as a district priority, and it's supported through board policy and the development of the new strategic plan. New Root's work is grounded in 3 strategies: relevance and readiness, equipping and cultivating preparedness and cultural competencies that nurture tools for impact, culture and climate, centering belonging and connection in all partner communities to strengthen culture and reaffirm investment in outcomes. And number 3, leadership, cultivating leadership that drives mindset, growth, and purpose-driven practices. Their mission, New Roots, which we'll get into later on, is to uplift restorative mindsets in adults to co-create thriving spaces for youth and communities through equity, wellness, and radical love. And so I'll pass it over to Eric to start the presentation.
All right. Good evening, everyone. If we can go to the next slide. So we just wanted to share with everyone this bit here that comes from our code of conduct. And so as you can see in there, we do note our positive behavioral interventions and supports, culturally responsive practices, restorative justice, and trauma-informed practices. As a department, we have been doing some work to just kind of realign our vision moving forward and kind of defining what supports and things we want to move forward with within the district. And all of the items that we're looking at fall within those highlighted areas that are defined in our code of conduct. So some of the work that we started to do is to really take a look at what our district needs are, and we've done some in-depth data work with the support of CISA to help identify our root causes for some of our issues and help support the evidence of need of the continued work that we're going to do. So these next few slides really just are a brief kind of snapshot of some of the data that we have here in our district. None of this data is going to be surprising to anyone. It's data points that we've referenced at various points throughout the last couple years. This first slide is just taking a look at out-of-school suspensions. This is a current year to date. It is broken down by ethnic group, so you can see the percent of out-of-school suspensions, and at the base of the graph there is the risk ratio. The risk ratios were calculated with the different ethnic groups compared to their white peers. The next slide then is office discipline referrals. So this is majors that are entered into the system. This again is broken down by ethnicity. You can see in the top the percents that are outlined there for you. And again, the risk ratios are at the base. The next two slides are just some academic data. We're really just pulling forward data and Aspire data on these two slides for ELA and math. As we've been doing some combined work with teaching, learning, and equity to really take, like I mentioned, that deep dive into what's going on and help kind of set a course of action for our departments, and then hopefully ultimately will also come through in our strategic plan here as a district. But you can see that, as we've noted before, again, academics have some area to grow as well. And we know that restorative justice and restorative practices are not just going to help in our social, emotional, and behavioral areas, but they will help to foster positive culture and climate within our buildings, which will ultimately help to increase academic achievement for all our students. So the next slide then is just the Aspire. Again, same thing, looking at ELA and math. So as we started the work to level set and kind of reintroduce restorative justice and restorative practices back into the district, we started by reaching out to some different organizations, and we've landed on 3 that we spent some time getting to know, getting to see what services they could provide us in and support that they could provide us in moving this work forward throughout the district. On the far right, Restorative Justice Ed, that was an organization based out of Fort Collins, Colorado. As you can see, they weren't able to offer a whole ton of on-site support to us. They would be able to offer some on-site training for 10 people, more of like a train-the-trainer model is what they look at. And then they give us access to all of their resources that we can use as we facilitate the work throughout the district. The next organization that we connected with was Restore More. This organization is based out of Atlanta, Georgia. They did have limited availability for their staff to be on site, and they were basically offering us the opportunity for 6 professional development sessions, 1 administrative professional development opportunity, 1 restorative tune-up workshop, and then some parent workshops. And then if you take a look at the far left, the New Route, which is the organization that Missy had mentioned that we are going to ultimately recommend to partner with the district for this work, they are able to offer us almost twice as much as the other 2 organizations. They are based here nearby in Chicago, Illinois. They would be willing to facilitate what they call a district wellness check. They would have 2 dedicated trainers for ongoing support for our district. They'd offer multiple professional learning opportunities for administrators, as well as an administrative community of practice. They would also do the same with professional learning and a community of practice for some school-based teams. They would offer district-wide professional development for all staff. They work really hard to help make sure that the work that is done has connections between the SEL, the social, emotional, and learning work that we do as a district, as well as the restorative justice work that they would help us facilitate. And they also offered options for parents and families so that the work doesn't just live within our school buildings, but can also spill out into the community. So Carrie is going to kind of go into a little more detail around some of the services that New Route would offer with a partnership with our district.
Thanks, Eric. Good evening. Carrie Oscar, Coordinator of Specialized Behavior Support. So my role in facilitating conversations with these vendors was to be very specific about the needs based on our root cause. And so the next slide here will demonstrate basically we pitched for the sky and came back and did a lot of negotiating around a proposed cost. But I'm just going to talk through kind of our processes. As Eric had mentioned, the 2 other companies we're able to offer sporadic PD. And historically, talking to a lot of veteran staff and just experience myself, that's kind of been our plan. We maybe do one rollout workshop, and then we say we're integrating restorative practices, and maybe we hold a circle every now and then, but we don't upkeep and facilitate that. So that was one of our initial asks, as you'll see on the left side. We wrote into our plan, and I'll go specifically, but one of the things that they actually counter-proposed to us, not that we didn't think of it, but they wanted a really hearty initial wellness check. So an audit of what does our system look like, how is it functioning from all stakeholders. So they wrote that as their first item there. So district staff, principals, APs, and 2 building leaders, they're also open to community or other people that would like to participate. But this is really a needs assessment from their companies to do a group check-in and do an audit of where are our values at, what do we say are our values, how do they show in our practices in terms of structures and systems within our district. And then they, it sounds very succinct, but they also spend time following up with our district leadership team to give us a comprehensive summary of their findings of that time. It is co-facilitated in discussions and as well as breakout, and I would imagine that it's somewhat parallels to the work that many of us in the room are doing around our strategic priorities, just in relation to restorative practices and restorative justice. So this is what my team pitched to them, and they have not seen this before. But one of the things that when we went into the proposal to counter-propose back to them, we really felt like, yes, we certainly needed professional development, but we also needed strategic, timely, and often check-ins with all of our stakeholders. And so you'll see on the top, it's kind of broken into the line 2 and 3 are focused on administrators, and as you continue down, 4 and 5 are focused on what we're going to call our leadership team for restorative practices, restorative justice. And so as you look at line 2 there, it's not very often, aside from admin PLCs, that admin across our district, meaning principals and assistant principals, have an opportunity to develop themselves as leaders. And so one of the things that we wrote in is we wanted quarterly workshops just focused in on principals and APs. And so they are willing to do that, and we have that written into the proposal with the focus on community building as well as establishing a restorative school culture. So offering skills that we know we need in our schools for administrators. The second one is more of a touch point. So we said that's quarterly, and we're worried about what happens in between those quarterly visits. So we actually proposed to them, and they've agreed that they would be willing to offer us monthly check-ins, so working on our schedule with administrators to do a monthly, just school-based administrative meeting. They would all come together, and that's really important to them. Not that they weren't willing to have a Merrill meeting and a BMHS, but they thought it was really important that if we collectively are growing a culture that we believe in, that all administrators should have that experience together. And so you'll notice, I'm sorry I didn't mention it on 2, but 2 and 3, collectively, all administrative teams are together. I just want you to know that. So some of the topics, I thought, again, kind of some of the companies and other things that we've experienced before are maybe kind of a one and done, or you have to kind of really breathe depth into that. But you'll notice the topics that they would focus on: change management, social emotional learning within a tiered system of support, developing a strong culture and climate, and analyzing data within that effectively. So that's a monthly check-in for administration, meaning principals and APs. As you go down, you know, in terms of leadership, assistant principals and principals are obviously the leaders of the building, but you also need champions within the building. So we're asking assistant principals and principals to identify 2 building leaders, so champions for the work, that would also participate in a monthly meeting with district-wide. And this is their term. New Route calls them early adopters in terms of school teams. So if you think of implementation science and change, right, starting with a group that really builds impact and moves forward, they just wanted 2 people. They really wanted purposely to keep those groups small, and they are willing to offer a 4-series workshop, so again, quarterly, again, focused on community building and establishing a restorative culture. And then we continue down, and I'm sorry, I skipped to row 5 and 4, but essentially mimic. So we also asked them for a monthly check-in with those people. So the really admin hyper-focused, and then also building focused as well. As you get down to the bottom, we thought this was really interesting in their proposal. And we don't want to exclude staff as we potentially have this opportunity, but one of their big pushes is that they're not school facing in terms of student facing until year 2. They want a really solid foundation with administrators and school champions before they roll it out to staff. So it's not a practice, it's a way of being. It's a way that you move every day in the way that you are. And so we proposed back to them. So so it doesn't become, oh, it's another thing that maybe we don't have an opportunity to be involved in. We said we think it's really important that staff still have an opportunity to dabble and become aware with these staff members, because the 2 staff members that are assigned to us, we will have the entire first year, as well as years to come. And so we sort of counter-proposed back to them, could you offer, just naturally with our professional development days, 4 opportunities? And they said absolutely. Some of the 2 that they recommended are they hold the foundations for RJ and cultivating self-awareness. And they're 2-part sessions, so that naturally fits into our PD, although they were really passionate about it. Perhaps for year 1, it's a may-do. It's not a must-do yet, because you're trying to build your foundation, and then we're offering people the opportunity to engage. And then year 2, it's a non-negotiable, because as school culture is built, your foundation in terms of admin and your leaders have built, and so we move together then. So an opportunity, as they said, to dabble. So that is our what we asked for year 1 in terms of a specific list for services. And then if you go to the next slide, and when I say services, serving all 12 school buildings, so these price points that you see on the next one are inclusive of all 12 buildings for year 1. And it literally mimics the list I just went over, so I'll just give you a chance to look at it, with total cost of $164,000 to serve all 12 buildings in all of the ways that I just mentioned on the previous slide. So 10 community practices, 10 community team buildings, and then customized PD for both admin and leadership teams, as well as 2-part sessions, so 4 district-wide professional learning opportunities for all staff on those professional development days. So this would be the breakdown for year 1. And funded by what we actually came to share last time with some of the previous members, and welcome to those that are new, but would be funded by CCEIS funds, so early intervening. And I'll pass it back to Eric for our recommendation.
Thanks, Carrie. So our recommendation is we obviously want to push this work forward in the district. We know that it has lived in pockets in various forms, but to really, like Carrie had mentioned, help make it become part of our culture and our everyday, the everyday work that we do here in the district. We know that it's identified as a district priority and is supported through our board policy and the development of our new strategic plan. New Route does offer the partnership with professional learning for administrators, staff, students, families, as well as ongoing and on-site coaching, which we think is extremely important. And the work that they'll help us facilitate is rooted in making that connection between our social emotional learning that we do within the district, as well as our over academic social emotional and behavioral supports for all our students. And so we are recommending that New Route be recommended as the partner in continued work around our restorative justice and restorative practices here in the school district of Beloit.
Well, I would like to thank all 3 of you for your presentation. I'm going to open it up to questions from committee members.
You mentioned that this is a multiple year process. What would year 2 look like?
Sure. So year 2 then starts to build into, so we sort of wrote the 10-month and the 4, right? So that's not necessarily typical of their plan. They have agreed to mimic a very similar plan, but shave down in terms of, because they would like to integrate themselves into the building. So although that we might have 10 community of practice, perhaps 6 are pulled out and the other 4 are in the schools. And that's still up for negotiation. We worked the hardest on year 1, and not to say that we didn't on years 2 and 3, but it's completely, they basically said we want to see how year 1 goes, but we have a template that's very similar in terms of that. And the price points match it, is almost identical. But more time in schools, and one thing that's important to notice about their company too is they're not a company that's trying to hold on to us forever. Their real goal is to be exiting on year 4 or 5, that we've built a robust enough system that we can operate on our own.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Board Member Schneider. Board Member Winfield?
Yeah, I wanted to say I really appreciate the presentation. I just had a couple of questions. So question number 1, is there a component where they want to bring in like some community members to help out with building the culture in our schools?
Yeah, so the first is right away at that wellness check, right? So, and this company is pretty chilled that they say, hey, we're gonna do this, we're gonna say 30 people, but if you feel like you need 55 there, here, we're gonna put your price point at this, and then y'all negotiate. So they said, your stakeholders, who do you think is gonna have the largest impact? Their only caveat was who can be involved all the way through. So who can commit to the 10 sessions, right? So when you think about like that building, it would probably be most appropriate for the assistant principals, and when there's 2 building leadership champions or whatever, to involve community members. But yes, I mean, these companies like deep rooted in South Side of Chicago, and that's actually their history. The company started at a school where the school was in turmoil or whatever, and actually started within the 1.5 hour of social emotional learning time, built the capacity, had a lot of success, and then started to expand out. And did the same thing. They brought community members in, and it was naturally grown, and then they started to get calls outside of Chicago, and now they've multiplied. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And they're open to that. They very much are like, hey, we're on your ground. This is your space. So here's what we know has worked really well in CPS, and here's what we know has worked really well in surrounding communities. But you tell us who you need at the table to help us build that.
Nice, thank you.
Before I go, do other board members not on the committee have any questions?
I just have one quick question. One, thank you for pulling all this together. This is really helpful. When you mentioned bringing people into the buildings, has this been vetted to make sure it doesn't conflict with any existing MOUs we may have of who can work with our kids in buildings and who can't?
Yep, we've looked at all of that.
Thank you very much. Any other board members have any questions? Go ahead.
I have one more.
Please, yeah.
What do we have in place now for something that we will think that will build the culture in Beloit? Do we have any programs or any businesses that's helping, or is it just us on our own?
My honest answer?
Please.
Okay.
Please.
Not a whole lot. We have bits of trainings throughout, so we might operate on like with the 4 PD days, that might be it, right? And we're building other systems in terms of supporting administrators to build their leadership skills, but that's one thing that was really attractive to this company. It's not a sit and get, it's not a here, let me pass you the Google folder. It's we will work hand in hand. When I said hey, I need y'all here every month, their eyes got real big. And I think I've met with them probably 25 times, I'm not kidding, over the last 3 months, because I just kept going back and saying, that won't work for us. And not what you're offering won't work for us, but we need a level of support that will. And they came back and said, it's like CPS and then us, which is a huge move that we approached them early on to try to establish that. Okay. It's not to say there aren't things happening, but a structured, systematized approach to that, honestly, my response was nothing, respectfully, unless you feel like it.
I don't want to take up too much time. Okay. So one more question.
I'm sorry, in terms of restorative practices, I want to be very clear about that.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yes. So my question is, now that you answered that so beautifully, with the whole, with this new route, have we reached out to administrators and said that this is what we're looking at, or did it just come into the board right now?
Informally, just with my CCEIS work, I'm in the buildings all the time. And so, before I even mentioned new route, I said, hey, what do you think about being pulled in monthly, right? Because if we can't get them in, then it's not going to go anywhere. Well, tell me more. What are we going to be talking about? So just via informal conversations. I don't want to speak that I've had a conversation with every single administrator, but as I've found my way into buildings, I'm just kind of asking open-ended questions. And I think that they're really looking for a structured support system that can help them too. But one thing that I've, at least, I only want to say like maybe 5 or 6 out of 12. So please, don't quote me on 12 out of 12. But they appreciate it that it's a built process. It's not year one, let's have everything in place. It's very rare that you start with administrators. These companies come in ready and then they're gone in 1 year, and then it's your job to infiltrate and implement. And so that was one attractive piece in terms of us, that you're really working with your administrative teams. And as turnover occurs, right, we're trying to build the foundation so that it's not person-specific.
That's perfect. Thank you.
I would just add to that, to Carrie, that, what you were saying, that administrators, while we may not have directly mentioned new route to them, many of our administrators have been asking for targeted support around restorative practices and helping to move us beyond just restorative circles within the classrooms and different environments in our building, but really to make it that integrated part of our culture.
I'll just add staff are requesting it as well as administrators.
Thank you. Are there other committee members or board members with questions at this time? I have a couple just quick questions and comments. First, everything you've said just like deeply resonates with me as an educator as well, and I'm just so thrilled to see this coming forward. I was in that first group of folks at Memorial to go to UW Green Bay and get that original restorative practice changing, and it absolutely fundamentally changed me as a teacher, and I just have seen the value of it, and I'm so excited that we're moving forward with this. So thank you, because I know this is probably tremendous work to get all this together. Thank you. A couple quick questions. Is it possible, and you'd mentioned that they were going to work with community and families. One of the resounding issues, and maybe like disconnects and like possibilities and opportunities for in like bridging communication with our broader community, is a lot of people feel like there is not current, like consistent enforcement of the code of conduct, and not everybody by any means, but I have heard people be concerned, like, oh, well, restorative justice, restorative practices, that's going to just like mean that there's more inconsistency, right, with enforcing the code of conduct. Is it possible to do like some community education, some outreach from the district to the community to help so people can see these systems and processes?
Yep, I think New Route would be all about that. They've been Carrie really has, she's not lying when it's like this back and forth. They've been very accommodating to every request we've had. And one of the really important pieces when we went to all three companies was the family engagement, parent engagement piece. And that was one thing that was big with New Route. We didn't get that from any other company. So I think in partnership with them, there's absolutely that opportunity. I don't know if
Yeah, we said the same thing. Like that was, it's probably Eric's line, not mine. But he opened with, "Do you offer something more than just restorative circles?" Because that's exactly where people get caught up. And so they said, "Yes, absolutely. You know, it's deeper than that." And when we asked about families, they are so. And maybe just because I'm talking to a lot of curriculum companies and maybe they operate in a different way right now, but they weren't even concerned about putting a price point to it because they're so indebted to the work that if they commit to a district, they mean it. They don't need to have, so that we're still cautious, like we'll write it into the MOU and things like that. But they just said, oh, that's just part of, like it's just bundled in your wellness. Like a few times throughout the year, we would love to join you in meetings or whatever. She knew we were presenting tonight and checked in with me 2 times today and said, do you feel like you have everything you need? And we haven't paid them a cent yet. So yes, absolutely.
No, that's great to hear. And so, yeah, just before I let go of that point, just making sure that as we move forward, and I'd love to hear it come back to this committee, maybe like later on in the year, just kind of hearing like how is that, specifically parent and family, but, community engagement going and like what feedback and what connections maybe were we able to fill in for folks would be really helpful to know.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a reminder that some of that work might be more present for families and students year 2 because you're building that foundation to solidify exactly what you said, because the ones that are making that decision that they're hearing about or misinformed about is likely from that administrator, right? So we need to make sure that our administrators are in a good space first to be implementing these systems so that they're implementing them to fidelity and with a restorative lens collectively too. So I would say yes, we're slowly, but just know it might not be a resounding outcome for all community members year 1.
No, for sure. No, I mean, Rome wasn't built in a day. That's awesome. And it sounds like we're on a great path. So that actually segues nicely into my last question. So like internal communication. I know in the past there have been, and I love that you said that there were staff requesting this. I think there's also been some staff who have felt like, well, if we do restorative practices and restorative justice, that this is just going to be kid gets sent right back to my class. And, can you talk about ways that you've anticipated those issues and like how we're planning on, making sure our staff are comfortable with how we're moving forward and feel supported?
I think we have initial thoughts, but are you okay if we work with them part 2?
It's on the radar. That sounds good.
Yep, because this is for information only tonight, and so when we bring it back for action, we'll definitely address that in our presentation on that night.
I really appreciate that. Thanks. And I believe Board Member Levy just has one final question. Go ahead.
Yes, and it's brief, and I don't need a response tonight, but when you come back, I'm just going to be transparent. As a parent, one of my frustrations with restorative practices, which I support the process, is let's just say you have 2 students involved and both of them are at fault. Traditional models of restorative practice kind of make sense to me. But is there nuance in the program that we're thinking about working with if there are 2 students involved and only 1 student is at fault. And what I'm thinking is there would be a different level of engagement depending on what role you had in the incident. Has that kind of nuance been addressed and discussed?
Not with me.
Okay, if we just couple it and we'll address those two? Thank you.
I didn't know if you had any hands.
I have one.
Yep, please go ahead, Board President.
So just as thank you for your work and as you're continuing to shape. As a board, we do have policies. We have a student code of conduct. And the code is there. Most recently, there's been updates to that code. We have procedures in the district when students violate codes of conduct. There's, a manner of responses, leading up to expulsion hearings, which as a board we do conduct. We don't farm those out to a lawyer anymore. As a board this year, we have heard all of those expulsion hearings that have been referred to us. So those are the most extreme things that have been reported to us. We understand that there is an administrative hearing process, and sometimes students go through that and they don't make it to the board for expulsion, but that's part of our process. A practical matter as an administrator in my day job and experiences, the expectation when a student has committed a violation of a code of conduct, the administrator in the building, the classroom teacher, that oftentimes that relationship in terms of what the professional educator expects will happen and what the administrator will do, and then combine all the things that happen in the course of a school day, and when those expectations are not met, it's a conflict in the relationship. Looking at this approach, which is more than just giving out consequences, but like you said, truly creating a culture of accountability, and when there's harm done, harm is repaired. That's the practical matter of what life in classrooms and buildings are like. As a board, we understand that our role is to create policies, and we have those policies. When students violate those policies, they may be recommended to expulsion hearings, and then there's consequences for the violation of those policies. It's very important for us as a district that we answer the questions and criticisms that rightfully come our way when people describe the learning environment and disruptions to the learning environment. We are a system that we're working on many things and putting things in place. I'm excited by the work that's presented, but in that framework that as a board, the 7 of us have done the things that we can do in our role and being in our role. And so your role as you're seeking out these programs to continue to help our administrators build their skill set and then to create these learning environments for our students are very important. So please, in your follow-up, talk about and seek information around the principal and the classroom teacher expectation. And that space, and like you said, there's 12 different buildings, there's consistency, but that there's an internal consistency in that building where there are agreed upon expectations of how this code of conduct will be implemented, and that as as co-workers, we're not letting each other down, and as the leaders of the students, we're not letting them down by not having an environment there. And then the last part is also our special learners, our learners who have special needs. When we think about how our IEPs are written, and that sometimes the behaviors that are disruptive might be a manifestation of a young person's disability, but there's a lack of understanding of professionals and others and even the students, like, why did he do that and he gets to stay here? All right? Or they say, well, it's on his IEP. Every behavior is going to be a manifestation. There's nothing we can do about it. All right? Or What's the day 11 plan? I don't know. We never got to day 11. We didn't make it yet. Those are the types of things that we need to consider, and can you have them address those concerns? And when you come back, be prepared to discuss them. Thank you.
Thank you, Board President Levy. Go ahead, please.
Just one brief thing, and this may be another one that falls into, you may not have an answer or something you can bring back, but you're looking for, or a recommendation for this one-year plan, but it's really not a one-year plan, right? You said, so best case scenario, it works swimmingly. You bring them back years 2 through 5, we're set on our own, right? That's the goal. So my question is, how do we measure that? How do you, what would be a success for you so that a year from now you come back and say, hey, we're ready for year 2, year 1, did this? Think about what you can bring to show, the value in it, because that would be something that I'd like to see, some tangible results, and it might not be metrics. I'm not sure how you would measure the success, but if you have an idea, I'd love to hear it.
So those beginning slides, when we were looking at that data, that's going to be our baseline data. We're looking at academic data. We're looking at suspension and expulsion data. We're looking at office discipline referral data. We're looking at attendance data. We're looking at seclusion and restraint data. We've dug all through that with a gentleman that we're working at through CISA. He's really helping us look at that. So that's our baseline. So we'll continue to be looking at that. And the hope is we're looking at disproportionality, and we're also looking for that data to improve, because we can only go up from where we're at right now. So that's just my initial thoughts, but we can certainly bring some more information back too.
Okay.
Great questions. I know a couple of years ago at one of the board meetings, we had some parents show up and give some really positive anecdotal feedback about just some transformative experiences that their children had with restorative practices. So I love the baseline stuff that you just described. I think bringing in qualitative pieces to that would be really beneficial. Also, again, with just that what we're putting out into the community too.
Board
For
Member
sure.
Miller, have one more.
Oh, please, go ahead.
Right. Another component that I'd like you to bring back information on is, what is the, in their approach, what is their plan in working with homes, the families? Students are young and they're learners. They're in a process of their development. Many of the behaviors they exhibit when they're amongst their peers are behaviors that they know are not okay with the people that they live with. And if you were to ask them, why are you doing these things if you know that they are not okay with your family members at home? They just, I don't know, because I'm around other 12-year-olds that are doing it too. But there has to be a willingness to confront our young people in love, to hold them to a higher standard. These behaviors, when they go unabated and unchecked, they just pile up and continue. But I think that as we begin to look at our approach, and for all the things that we're going to be asking of our community, is that for our families to be true partners, and if the behaviors that your children are exhibiting when they're away from home, just being 12-year-olds with other 12-year-olds, are not okay, we really need you to step up. So what does New Root have to help us engage our families so that we can go back to what I consider to be a cultural and geographic centering of who we are as Beloiters, that we know each other. We've grown up with people's brothers and sisters and cousins, aunts and uncles. We're a community that cares, and you're misbehaving because you think that these people are not connected to you or don't know you. But these things are not happening in a vacuum. There are people that are connected and know you, and once that accountability is brought, those behaviors that they think they're in isolated environments, but there's no cover for it. That's one of the things that I believe we have to emphasize in our system, and through this process of restorative justice and helping them be a part of a community, we need to engage our families, because there's only so much that we can do in schools.
Thank you so much. Any other thoughts or comments before we move forward? Dr. Keiser, did you have anything?
No, I just want to thank the committee and board members for their questions and comments. I know that this has been a lot of work on the team's part, and so we'll unpack these questions and be able to come back next month with a formal ask and answers to as many of these questions, and then if not, tell you how we plan to address those questions moving forward.
No, that's perfect. I would like to echo just that thanks, just so much gratitude for you bringing this forward and putting the work in. I mean, this is everything for our kid. I mean, this is going to touch everything, and I really believe this is really going to move the needle up in many ways. So thank you so much, and I'll look forward to hearing your presentation next month.
Yeah, we're excited. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that takes us to our next item for information, which is the Beloit Virtual School Programming. All right, it looks like Ms. Moratek is coming up. Thanks for coming tonight.
Good evening, Teresa Mortek, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. I also have Jeff Strendrus online. He's the Director of CTE and Alternative Ed, and has really dug into this work. So we're also here just for information, but the purpose and the why is in our second lap, we'll be asking for board approval to move to consent agenda so that we can switch platforms. Typically, we don't always come to the board for platform switches, but in the mindset of a brick and mortar world, if we were to move a school site, we would ask for that. So this is a virtual school, and because of that, if you kind of imagine what we're asking is that we're moving virtual school to virtual school. And so this is moving from Fuel Ed, which is what we currently have as our virtual school platform that our 82 students are engaged in from Beloit to the Wisconsin virtual school. And so this information is just to talk about the why there, and where we're at and where we want to go, and why we feel like this is a better option for our kids. Okay, Jeff, go ahead.
Thanks, Teresa. Hello, my name is Jeff Stenrus, and I am the Director of Careertech Ed and Alternative Schools. As Teresa said, we're looking at moving a platform, changing from what we currently have to Wisconsin Virtual School. So I'll go through just a little bit of information with you. Whoever is driving, if we can move to the next slide, thank you. So where are we? Well, if we move one more slide together, we show up our data. And what's happened is, you can see for a couple of years are grouped together. Pre-COVID, we're around 20 students that are in our platform. And then COVID hit and it moved up to 68, 49, and then I have this current year broken down into 4 different groupings. We did an early fall, a mid-fall. We had a number of students returned or removed due to inactivity, and then there are winter and spring numbers. And so you can see we've grown from somewhere in the 20s up to roughly 80 to 90 students participating in Wisconsin Virtual School. The K-5 band and the 6-8 band have changed slightly up and down, not dramatically, but the 9-12 band has grown quite a bit. And that's where we're seeing the most growth with our students in virtual school. All right, next slide. So one of the pieces I looked at was a cost analysis of this. And Fuel Ed, the virtual school program, it is costly. So I've taken numbers and gauged out enrollments based upon the past where we kind of sat. So I looked at 612 with 90 students in there, which kind of is about where we have been during the course of this year. And 3 courses, 2 semesters, and it gives you a cost. K-5 took 24 students, where we have been at about. They have enrollment. There's enrollment costs of 188, but there's also supplies, subscription fees of those pieces, and it roughly comes out to be about $279,000. Now, I also then took our actual current monthly bills and went from September through March, and we are already at $241,000 for the year. And as I project out those averages and look at costs, like see September and February are higher, and that's because of the materials that we actually get, the book, paper materials that also accompany this class. So our projected yearly cost is about $290,000 for our Beloit Virtual School this year. Next slide. So what Dr. Betsy Schroeder and Chris Whitney, who are the administrators at BLA, who have covered Beloit Virtual School in the past, we put together a survey of our parents that are at Beloit Virtual School, and we sent out 107 emails. We only got 11 responses. So this is just information that we did. COVID, safety. You can see that 45% of them were enrolled for more than one school year. We asked about the support that was in there. 18% said it didn't meet their students' needs. Next slide. So we asked them about a platform change. How likely would they be continuing in virtual school if we change the platform? 54% said unchanged, 36% said more likely, and only 9% said less likely. So they weren't tied to the platform. And then the following question went into, well, if we're looking at different models, asynchronous totally, a mix of asynchronous and a few live times, a few meeting check-ins, a mix of asynchronous and synchronous classes, a blended one. And as you can see, and they could check more than one of these. So that's why the percentages add up to more than 100%. And so you can see that it was the asynchronous piece and mixed with synchronous piece were also up there quite high with 36%. The parents connected usually two of them. Next slide. In addition, while we didn't get a very high rate of response, we also made phone calls to a number of families to do some focus questions. And we asked them some questions about what they felt were positives and negatives. The last 4 bullet points there really kind of stand out. The teacher access and interaction with what we currently had was lacking. There were some issues with submitting work and getting grades, the structure, and they'd like some more live opportunities. So those are some of the down pieces, and they weren't meeting their student needs. So the content wasn't the issue. It was the interaction and personalization of the program. So, next slide. In the summary of the program, it really is, Fuel Ed is really a higher cost to other options, and I'll go through some costing of our proposal. The challenge to support effectively with our current platform, it really is the 2 BLA administrators have been trying to follow up with these 90 students in addition to running the Beloit Learning Academy, which, you know, it requires its own administrative piece of it. The programming is limited, is mostly asynchronous, and there's a pretty high dropout and failure rate that are associated with what we currently have. Next slide, please. And that's where I want to show you this, that if you look at the, and I only focused in on grades 6 through 8 and 9 through 12 because the K through 5 ones have their engagement is measured in hours or minutes of being on the program platform, and they are quite high. So our lower school kids are fairly successful. It's moving up that we don't see this. So if you look at first semester of this school year in 6 through 8, we had 77% of them had failures or incompletes, and 56% of the high school kids had failures or incompletes. The virtual platform that we have isn't meeting the needs of those students. You can see it's really highest amongst 10th and 11th graders. With that, the seniors who are really trying to get out, they seem to have a little bit more focus. I don't have historical pieces on that into past years with that breakdown, but that was sort of what we wanted to show is that really with our 10th and 11th graders looking at this option, it's not meeting their needs. All right, one forward, please. So why would a change be more successful? Number one, with the change to the Wisconsin Virtual School platform, this is one of the pieces that Teresa had mentioned about getting board approval. The virtual school platform there also requires a coach/coordinator on our end from the district side of things to help with the monitoring and the paperwork pieces with the virtual school. They do require a student orientation to virtual learning. Every student has to go through an orientation program before they can go ahead and be a part of the platform. So it isn't just, well, you sign up and turn it on and you just go on your own pace. There's regular progress monitoring. Our current platform has some progress monitoring, not as frequent. In this case, it's almost weekly in all cases, and they have an improved tutoring and homework support structure because they do not let the kids hang out there for 30 days, 60 days, and not being engaged. They want to make sure that they're keeping them on pace as much as possible. All right, move forward, please. So where are we going? Where are we going is what I've been doing some research on and taking a look at this, partnering with the Wisconsin Virtual School, which is out of CISA, I don't remember, is it 8, I believe? It's out of Tomahawk. And they have programming options that are more than just asynchronous classes. They have a K-5 programming that is asynchronous. They have one that provides asynchronous and also daily synchronous classes in the 6th or 8th program the same way, or you can have where it's just asynchronous 4 days a week, but Fridays are a community building synchronous activity portion of it. They also have credit recovery and AP and also dual credit programs through the high school. So it's a very comprehensive structure. Next slide, please. Well, we've laid out a 3-year model, and the plan for this would be year 1, which is next school year, is to simply just have a platform change. And with that comes a learning coach that would be a partial FTE somewhat allotted to this. For year 2, it is staying with the Wisconsin Virtual School, the learning coach, and now moving some school district Beloit teachers into the virtual platform to teach. Now, it doesn't mean that they would be teaching kids from Ashland or Racine or Kenosha. They could be just Beloit school district kids. But what happens is we get a reduced cost but when we put our own teachers into the platform. And then start to look at what are some of our blended learning environments and options for some of our brick and mortar kids who want to take a virtual school class because they have something going on. Maybe they're involved in a youth apprenticeship program, so they have a work-based learning opportunity, but it happens at the same time as Class X is. Well, now they can take Class X as a virtual program because it's in a la carte. We can just pick one as we want to. And then year 3 is expanding that to reimagine what does it look like. Our virtual school shouldn't be take an asynchronous class, or it's just an asynchronous with one live component. I can see this being a blended continuum that one kid chooses one option and another kid chooses another option, and it goes into realm from K through 12. You talked about some of these administrative hearings. Well, is an option for a student to be involved in virtual school? Does that expand our opportunities and meet our student needs? So that's the 3-year growth. First year, just simply a platform change, and then incorporating teachers and a wider array of services. Next slide, please. Here's a year 1 platform change. I took those same 90 students that I did with Fuel Ed in high school, middle school, high school, and the same 24 K4 students, and we don't get charged supplies, subscription fees. Trainings are free, or there are a few low-cost ones. But just based on those same numbers, we're looking at a projected cost savings of about $85,000 with those same numbers of students. Again, comparing apples to apples and courses that we have with that. Next slide. So year 2 then goes to adding 2 virtual teachers. And what I did is I chose one at the K5 level and one at the 6-12 level. And I took those same number of 90 students and 24 students, and I broke them down a little bit with this, and we get an even greater savings. So it'll be a savings of $118,000 over Fuel Ed, but a year 1 to year 2 savings of $33,000. Now, again, I tried to be conservative. I didn't try to take 45 out of the 90 kids. I only took 10 out of that middle school, high school group. The elementary portion is a little bit easier, so I took half of them. Because a teacher there could be an elementary teacher, and covering multiple grades, multiple subjects is a little bit more flexible with it. So as you can see, there's a great savings in it from year 1 and additional savings to year 2 and moving forward. All right, next slide. So some of the pieces that are these value-added services from Wisconsin Virtual School are online student orientation. They are Wisconsin teachers. They're aligned with Common Core standards. They provide trainings for us at no extra cost with this. We have our own local control. We can choose to have one teacher teaching some things. We can use their teachers for everything else. They provide 24-hour tutoring services for grades 4 through 12. Their regular progress monitoring. They have indicator points and checkpoints every week to make sure that students are engaged. Where our current platform, they just send out reports, and you can choose to do what you want with them. Where Wisconsin Virtual School, the teachers do much more of a follow-up to make sure, and then that they report that back to our virtual school coach. They would say, hey, Dr. Keyser, you're our learning coach, and that these 3 students have not been engaged in the last week at all. Could you please follow up on them? Whereas with our current model, we didn't have, they just sent out reports periodically and not with a follow-up for it. So there's a lot of value-added services. If we put our own instructors in there, they train our instructors on how to teach virtually in this platform. So it's not just place them in there and let them go on their own. And then the communication plan, as we reached out to all of our stakeholders, communicate everything out to our current BBS families to let them know of a change. Announce this to our internal stakeholders, administrators, counselors, teachers, so everybody's aware of the options and services that we currently have, because right now it's sort of an unknown. It's BBS. It's just you take online classes, and that's it. We want to expand that information and knowledge. New BBS information posted on our website, in that we are able to market this and plan for this a little more cohesively through our own school district website, and then to all families, and making sure that everybody knows that this is an option, because brick and mortar isn't for everyone, and they're choosing this. We want it to be successful for them and let them know what options are available. So with that, like I said, the proposal is to move the platform for year one, and there is a virtual coach coordinator that needs to be with that, and encompassing, noticing the savings that we have just for year one, and that trying to offset the cost of whatever FTE might have to be allotted for it.
Thank you so much for this presentation. It was very thorough and informative. It's definitely really good stuff. I have a few things. Do other committee members have questions or thoughts? Go ahead, please.
I just got one. I'm just curious. What was the decision process for our last learning virtual, for the one that we have now? What was the decision process on that one? To anybody?
So there was a bit of a analysis, because we had multiple platforms when I was first coming in 2 years ago, and the decision was to continue with 2 platforms and move to one. Fuel Ed ended up being that platform. How they ended up with 2 different platforms when they initially started Beloit Virtual School, I'm familiar with.
Go ahead, please.
Do we know the student achievement level between virtual students and those that are on site on a daily basis?
Comparatively, like I said, we have high rates of the Fs and incompletes with this. Right now I have some people working on getting our 6 through 12 rates, so we can compare, because I do have it for the virtual school, but to do comparative rates, that'd be something I have to follow up on. But we are working on that right now.
Because I think that'd be a kind of a key component when you decide to grow a program. Obviously, we'd love to grow effective programs and put put resources where they're effective. So I think that's going to be a key piece. And if it proves effective, then by all means, let's get the best platform to move it forward. So I look forward to that.
So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. I'm looking at the slide that says why a change will be more successful than our current model, and there's 4 bullet points there. Am I understanding this correctly, that currently there isn't a coach or coordinator for our virtual school platform, and there's also currently no student orientation?
There is no student orientation. Our current school platform is the intake meetings and registration, and some follow-up is being done by our 2 administrators at Beloit Learning Academy, Betsy Schroeder and Chris Whitney. They kind of done that in their offshoot, that's in their sideline. That's what it had been when there was only enrollment of 20 students, and it was just continued in that matter. So we do not have a dedicated coach, coordinator, or somebody who puts their time forward to it as part of their their job description as monitoring progress.
So the students are on their own with our current platform?
No, not completely, but they do calls and follow-ups. If you looked at that earlier slide where we said some students were dropped or they returned to their schools, because we did have some follow-up points to kids who are not being engaged. But the platform that we currently have they don't give us engagement reports as often. We have to try to pull some of that a little bit more often. And again, because those administrators are operating an increased capacity at BLA, their follow-up is not as dedicated as it needs to be. We're truly not doing enough on our end without having a virtual coach or coordinator.
And then my final question, I'm concerned that you only received 11 surveys. So my first question is, was there anything that was done once you received those 11 surveys to reach out to parents and to increase that number? And then two, since you have so few surveys, and you can save this for when you come before the board with the recommendation in the interest of time, but I'm curious as to know what data are you using, because I'm certain you're not pulling from parent surveys because we have so few. What other data are you using to make this recommendation? And again, you can hold the response until you come with the recommendation.
Go ahead.
I have talked to people in other districts who have been using the platform that we want to move to, and those districts have indicated when they've changed to this platform that it has increased the student performance and student success. So, I mean, from everything that I've heard, this is a good platform to move to, and I think we'll have success with it too, especially if we have one person who's dedicated to doing all that follow-up pieces with it. So, thank you.
Thank you. Those great comments. Anybody else? I just had a couple of things, but we're cool. Okay, yeah. Well, I'll just start by echoing Board Member Schneider. Yeah, I've also heard like excellent things. I know a few people work with Wisconsin Virtual School, and I would share that sentiment. Building off of Board Member Levy's concern, I was also so the fact that we got 11 responses kind of points to a parent engagement issue. And so my question would be, how are we, would the scope of the role of this coordinator then be to grow family engagement? So yes, and then what are some, do we have like some sense of like what we can do? Because it's hard, it's different, right? When a kid is coming in virtually. So are there strategies or some things that you thought over that you could possibly bring back for our next meeting that you could talk about specifically to parent and family engagement?
Yeah, we can certainly come back with that. And I think also, like, as we partner with WVS, this is what they do, right? And so I'm sure that there's a lot of lessons learned within that group of people that we'll be sharing out, and that coach gets taken under their wing as well, so that they're trained to understand how to do, virtual learning platforms. And I think, as we've lived through COVID, it was what we consider virtual learning is very different than what it has potentially become. And so, just the idea of expanding access, so we may have students that choose to just do virtual learning, and we might have students that, as we talk about with the 12-hour school day, if you've heard that verbiage before, it doesn't mean kids are sitting in seats for 12 hours. It means we may be in a situation where we have kids that go to the high school and take classes face-to-face. They might want to take French online, and they might have a job in the afternoon, and then they come back and do some more virtual learning, right? We need to be responsive to where our kids are at today. And we have some kids and young people that are in that type of situation where they would learn best. And so that's what this is really about, is that grow into model and what we can do to be innovative and think outside the box. And I would also say, I agree with you. I was concerned about the level of responses. So that's why we pressed on doing focus groups or just calling families to get just conversations and feedback. So I agree with you. We'll continue to do that, because I most certainly don't want anyone to be surprised that's involved in it. We have 82 people that are currently in our program. So, it's a growing program. It's just, how do we have a better platform to meet people's needs, and we see higher success rates. And so that's, to your point, when we look at the data, that is our goal, that we're not just offering services, but people feel, successful. And something that did come out during the virtual learning time period was, how are we tending to the social emotional needs of students that are at home? And so this coach also, right, is kind of that contact that can be there on a more regular basis to check in with students, because, they may not be reporting to a place where we're checking in face to face. And so those are kind of those bigger nuances, I think, that'll come along with this. But we'll definitely come back with some of those key points when we move it forward.
No, that all sounds amazing. And
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. I used to be on a board for a virtual school, and we had a lot of parents that were all, like, would come to meetings or be on the board, and they talked about how powerful it was for their kids who were either neurodiverse or were chronically bullied, and how this was like absolutely like the best solution that was responsive for them. And so I love your vision, and I think, like, you know, presenting it that way would be amazing. To the point of the communication plan, I love that, you know, WVS works with dual enrollment, which often is, like, in general, the best kept secret of every school district. And it's a great way to get students engaged and possibly to attract students. So I would just hope that, like, when we're marketing, this could potentially be a really great way to bring kids into the district with those opportunities. And so I just want to make sure we don't lose the dual enrollment piece in that communication, because that's an outstanding feature.
Thank you for bringing that up, because you just reminded me of something else. And when you look at the slide deck, there's those hyperlinks so you can go into it and look at the courses. Dr. Keyser, what was that certification that we were speaking to when that's important for people to know when they're applying for, I think it's scholarships or courses? Do you remember what we were talking about?
Yep. So the NCAA Clearinghouse is something that's extremely important for any students who are thinking about the possibility of being a student athlete at a collegiate level. And it's kind of like dual enrollment. It's also something that if you're not paying attention to can trip people up. And so BVS has done the work with the NCAA Clearinghouse. And so when you click on these hyperlinks, particularly at the high school level, they will notify all the courses that have already been cleared. So this is also about not being intentional about not putting barriers in front of students, but taking barriers away and increasing access and opportunity. And to the point that was being made about expanding opportunities, this is an entity, the DPI does recognize Beloit Virtual School as, even though it's not a brick and mortar building, it is a school within the school district of Beloit. And so while a hidden gem, it has the ability to provide additional opportunities and access for those students who are coming here, but the potential of expanding and bringing other students because they can open and enroll directly into the Beloit Virtual School from other school districts. The biggest piece about Fuel Ed being our current provider is that Fuel Ed is providing all of the teachers, and we don't have any control over where those teachers were trained and what the content is being delivered other than the course description. Beloit, the Wisconsin Virtual School, are Wisconsin teachers teaching Wisconsin, built within the coursework and framework of the Department of Public Instruction. So we have a lot more control and say in being a part of that. You end up having teachers who can get the training for free, even if they never become a virtual teacher. They learn how to use digital media in a much better and much deeper way. Mr. Stenrus.
Yes.
I didn't know if you, I think I talked over you there for a second.
Oh, I was just going to say, Dr. Keyser, you're right. This is what Wisconsin Virtual School does. The director, as I spoke to him, he thinks that all but one of their teachers even lives in Wisconsin at this point in time. So they're not outsourcing it. But they also do have parent-family engagement strategies. I know there's some pieces about the social emotional well-being, and that's where some of the synchronous portions that they have, like assemblies, get-together events that are not just content related, but they have community building days within their virtual platform. So again, it allows us to do more than just say, here's an online class, log in, you're registered for it, we'll get the grade when you're done, and we'll progress monitor. There's the training for the teachers, there's the orientation for the students, there's the SEL component, there is, again, lots of different pieces to reach students, and that's what we want to do because we're looking at our current model not serving our students well. When you look at what those failure and incomplete rates are, we're missing something drastic there. And so this is a much, not only a cost savings, but also a greater ability of a program to expand our opportunities to reach our students.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to send you a follow-up email because I have some other things, but I want to be conscious of the time. Does anybody else? Go ahead.
Just quickly, I too want to add to my understanding of WVS, its use in the state of Wisconsin. I think that it is an improvement for our program And like you said, the opportunity to help us by offering unique programming that meets the needs of our students. That virtual learning is more than just a pandemic response, but also could be a way for us to reclaim students that we have lost through open enrollment. Because when people are complaining or critiquing or having an experience that is less than desirable in that physical learning space, the relationships that can be formed through our virtual school by still being supported by professionals in the school district, this is a unique opportunity that we need to seize upon. So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions? This is awesome. Thank you so much, and I look forward to hearing this come back.
Thank you.
All right, with that said, that takes us through our information discussion items, which finally brings us to our action item, which is if Mr. Bosco, if you wouldn't mind coming up. Thank you.
Good evening, board. We're looking for
Mr. Bosco, your mic's not on.
About that. I apologize. Good evening, board. I apologize. Looking for approval of the BH 365 Social Studies supplement for our 6th through 8th grade Social Studies curriculum. As we begin curriculum writing this summer, and as we brought to you earlier in the year, the rewrite of Social Studies, the updates and revisions that will be going on over the course of the next couple of years for all of our Social Studies programs. We're continuing to build out the tech sets, and we're starting with our 6 through 8 to try to add some additional resources to make those experiences more culturally relevant for our students, and just build out the tech sets that are available for the teachers in the design of those courses.
Thank you very much. Any questions from committee members? Any questions from any other board members? Nope. I had a chance to look this over. It looks amazing. Would anybody like to make a motion to approve this to the recommendation for the full board? Move to recommend the full Board of Education the purchase of BH 365 supplemental materials in the amount of $152,407.58.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Oh, sorry. Aye. Thank you very much. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for taking the time. And given that our next meeting date, item 4A, will be June 21st at 5:30 p.m., would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of adjourning? It is 9:04 p.m. Please say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you very much.
All right, it's 9:06. We're going to start it at 9:10. I'm just telling you, 9:10. We're going to go at 9:10 because there's some movement and human needs, you know. And
I'm a school board member. He's a president. She's a vice president. She's the greatest person in the world. Wave your hand.
oh my God, you people, you people. All right, I want to call this meeting of the Human Resource Committee to order. Secretary Shope, could we have a roll call?
Brian Anderson,
Here?
Spencer Anderson,
Present.
Amy Levy,
Here.
Sean Levy,
Present.
Megan Miller,
Present?
Greg Schneider,
Present.
Jawan Winfield.
Present.
All members are present with Spencer Anderson virtual.
Item C, is there a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved by Board Member Schneider and seconded by Board Member Miller. For a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Unanimous and passes. Is there a motion for the approval of the minutes from the May 3rd, 2022 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member Miller and seconded by Board Member Schneider. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. That motion also passes. Before we entertain a motion to go into closed session, are there any things that board members have for open session?
So a couple questions. For the athletics and activities director position, if someone could share, what was the level of community involvement in the process of bringing forth the recommendation to the board?
Certainly. With the athletic director position, there were a number of applicants that had applied. There were several rounds, including Spark Hires, which is a one-way online screening interview tool. There were 4 separate rounds held at the high school. There was a round with the principal and myself. In total, there were 38 total individuals in all of the rounds, and it incorporated students, parents, community members, and administrators and teachers.
Thank you so much. My next question, is there a reason, well, one, the posting for both the athletics and activities director and the Fruzen principal position are both included in executive content or administrative content. Is there a reason those postings weren't made available to the public?
The postings are available to the public. They were on WeCan as well as Frontline and other places. They're provided as part of the resume for the board to review.
No, I understand it's available on other places, but my question is for board docs where people come to review information for the board, for the board meetings, is there a reason those postings, not the resumes, but the postings were included in executive content and not made available for the public on board docs?
There's not a reason why they couldn't have been available in the public section.
Okay, and then my next question, with the posting for Director of Athletics and Activities, is there a reason that the title is not the same on the posting as it is in the recommendations? I think it's listed as the Athletics Director, which would kind of omit the portion about activities. Is there a reason that the title of the job is not consistently the same?
That would be an oversight, and we'll correct that. It should be District Athletics and Activities Director.
Right, and then my final question for open session is that we have 3 exhibits. Is there a reason why the superintendent resignation is in its own exhibit and not included in Exhibit A?
The reason for that is because I signed the employment recommendation forms and I can't sign my own name on that form. So we put it as a separate exhibit.
Thank you.
Any other board members with items for open session before our consideration? All right. Okay. A motion may be made to convene the Human Resources Committee into closed session pursuant to Section 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses C, of the Wisconsin State Statutes relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Is there anyone to make the motion?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Moved by Board Member Miller and seconded by Board Member Levy. All those Is there any discussion? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Juwan Winfield,
Aye.
Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Amy Levy,
Aye.
Greg Schneider,
Aye.
Sean Levy,
Aye.
Megan Miller,
Aye.
Spencer Anderson.
Aye.
Okay, so
Motion carried unanimously.
all right, thank you. So we will go into closed session. There is a link for Board Member Anderson, and when we come back, we'll finish the open session items, and then we'll begin our regular board meeting. All right, the meeting of the Human Resource Committee, a committee of the whole, we are gathered again, reconvening in public session in order to take any action if necessary on items discussed in closed session. Is there a motion?
I move approval of Exhibits A and B with the omission of the Fruzen intermediate principal position.
Second.
It's been moved by Board Member A. Levy and seconded by Board Member Miller. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. All right. All right, our next meeting date is Tuesday, June 7th, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. Is there a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous. Okay, at 11:40 p.m., I'm going to call. It's just where we're at. That's what life has brought us. Today, still today, at 11:40 p.m., I'm going to call this regular meeting to order. Secretary Shope, could I have a roll call, please?
Brian Anderson.
Here.
Spencer Anderson.
Present.
Amy Levy has left. Sean Levy.
Present.
Megan Miller.
Present.
Greg Schneider.
Present.
Joanne Winfield.
Present.
So all members are present except Amy Levy, and Spencer Anderson is virtual.
All right. Do I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda excluding topics 4, committee and other board reports, and 3, reports to the board to be postponed to another time.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Megan Miller, second by Greg Schneider. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. The motion passes unanimously, so the agenda is amended. And we'll begin with our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have public comment?
Yes, we have one public comment. The email was received from Mandy Flood. My name is Mandy Flood. I'm a paraeducator as well as a mother of 3 children in the district. I am writing this email to express concerns I have about behaviors in the classrooms. There is no other way to say it. Behaviors are out of control. Teachers have no support, students are not able to learn, and children are scared to attend school. When I signed on to do this job, I did it to help children. We are no longer helping children. On a daily basis, we are being hit, things thrown at us, threatened to be killed, spit at, and cursed at. Other children are forced to listen to this and witness these behaviors. The children acting out are back in class 20 minutes later with no consequences. These behaviors run the schools. We are teaching these children it is okay to hit people as long as you say sorry. It is okay to roam the halls as long as you come back to class eventually. You don't have to listen. You can go to the office and get some attention and then come back when you are cooled down and ready. What are these children learning? They are missing classes and work. There is not enough time in the day for them to make up the work, so it just disappears. Not to mention the children who are not being pulled for services because the entire staff is too busy dealing with behaviors. These are the children who are suffering. This is not okay. As a parent, how do you tell your children it will be okay when you don't know? How are parents supposed to trust in the district staff to keep their children safe when kids are being stabbed with pencils, throwing chairs, and screaming at teachers daily and are back in class in 20 minutes like nothing ever happened? How do we assure our children that they will make it home unharmed at the end of the day when we are not certain ourselves? How do we expect our children to be ready for the next grade when their learning is being impeded by these behaviors? We are telling these kids that their education is not important. That is not okay. We have much great staff that are at the end of their ropes because of these behaviors. Staff are the bad guys with no support to deal with these behaviors. How is a teacher supposed to teach a class of students who want to learn when kids are screaming at the top of their lungs? As long as the child is not posing a danger, we are supposed to teach kids to ignore it. That seems fair. You can barely hear the teacher, but just take what you can from it. As a board, you need to come up with the policies to support the consequences of these behaviors. School suspensions, out-of-school suspensions, detentions. These kids need to learn it is not okay to act this way. As a staff, it is our job to teach them to be good citizens, and we cannot do this under these conditions. I worry if something does not change soon, the district is going to keep declining and losing many great staff and families that we cannot afford to lose. Many families are trying to hang on to the Beloit pride we had growing up, but it is becoming harder and harder to. Mandy Flood, paraeducator, Converse Elementary.
Okay. Our next agenda item, are we down to the consent agenda now?
Correct.
All right, at 5, our consent agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
All right. It's been motioned by Board Member Schneider. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And seconded by Board Member Miller. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. The consent agenda passes unanimously. And we are now at 6, executive session. A motion may be made and a vote taken to convene the Board of Education into closed session pursuant to section 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses C, relative to considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises a responsibility in section 19.851, parentheses, E parentheses, relative to deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public businesses whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Board Member Miller, seconded by Board Member Schneider. Any discussion? All those, is this a roll call vote? Roll call vote, please.
Yes. Joanne Winfield,
Aye.
Brian Anderson,
Aye.
Spencer Anderson,
Aye.
Craig Schneider,
Aye.
Megan Miller,
Aye.
Sean Levy.
Aye.
Motion carried.
All right. Okay. So at this point, we will be adjourning from closed session. So this will be the end of our public broadcast of our meeting. Thank you.